So I think the best way to start this off is to look at what the lines most likely will look like. We've seen a little bit in preseason already of what Todd McClellan is thinking of. Obviously, things are going to change once the regular season hits, but I think we have a firm idea on how they will shape up. And I also have some tweaks that I would like to see, but obviously I'm not the coach. So starting with line one, it's going to be centered by Kopitar. That's pretty obvious. His line mates are going to be a little bit different. I think we're going to see AI move off the first line in place of Victor Arvidsson. I think putting Victor Arvidsson on that first line is a good move. He's got the potential to be a very, very good goal scorer, and putting him with one of the best playmakers in the league, Anze Kopitar, is hopefully going to unlock that for him coming into this next season. On the right side, I think we're going to see what we've seen for over a decade now, Dustin Brown. It's pretty undeniable, the chemistry and the relationship that Brown and Kopitar have. I don't think that they're going to be broken up, even if Dustin Brown maybe isn't an ideal first-line winger. But if you think about it, there's not many players on this team that really can put up the goals that Dustin Brown has the past couple of years. And until someone can prove that, I think his spot on the first line is going to be intact still. So AI coming off the first line means that he's going to be put on the second line. And that's where I think we're going to see newcomer Phillip Danault be placed. I think that's a really good tandem defensively, especially now that we're going to be playing back in the Pacific. We're going to be facing lines with Connor McDavid. We're going to be facing the Vegas first line quite a bit. And having a line with AI and Danault that we can throw out there against them is going to be huge, because that's a pretty good shutdown line. Not that I think that's going to be the only role for this line. I think the Kings really want Danault to be able to play more offensively as well. And that's why I think you're going to see Adrian Kempe on that line alongside the three. I think you get a pretty balanced line offensively. You have a playmaker in Phillip Danault. You have Adrian Kempe, who hopefully is going to start scoring more goals, looking for the shot more. And then you have Alex Iafallo, who, again, he's going to be putting in goals, a front net guy, but most importantly, he's going to be running into the forecheck and hopefully digging pucks out, being able to feed Danault. Danault can feed Adrian Kempe. And, Kempe also pretty good defensively. So that's just, like I said, a really good shutdown line that you can throw out there when you need to, not always have to put Kopitar out there for every single defensive draw. And also that line has the potential to turn up the offense if need be. And like I said, their role isn't going to be exactly as just a defensive shutdown line, but if they can stay even against the top lines in the Pacific and also add in some offense as well, that's going to be exactly what the Kings want and what they're going to need for this coming season. So with the second line being more of the defensive-minded line, that means the third line can maybe have less of a defensive role and be the spot where you put guys who are trying to find some offense and try and spark the team. Depth scoring has been a real struggle for the Kings. And so I think on this third line, we're going to see Gabe Vilardi be the center. Now, I'll talk about this later in the video. I would really like to see Gabe Vilardi move to the wing. I think that would help his game a lot. But as of right now, the Kings see him as a center. He's going to be playing center. The reason I think he could switch to the wing is because I think Lias Andersson is going to be on that third line with him. Lias Andersson can play center. That's where he's played his whole career. And at the end of last year, we saw pretty good chemistry with Lias Andersson and Gabe Vilardi. I'm a huge Lias Andersson fan. I think he has so much more to give than what teams have allowed him to show. And I think this year, if he's on this third line, that's going to be more of a offensive-minded scoring line and less of your typical checking line. It could be really good for the team. And Lias Andersson, he's also very responsible defensively, so he can help out Gabe Vilardi in that kind of sense. And then another guy who maybe lacks a little bit defensively is the newcomer, Vladimir Tkachyov. He was someone who I was really interested to see what was going to happen with him. A KHL player coming over from Russia. We've seen this before. It hasn't really worked out, but from what we've seen from him so far in training camp and the preseason, he looks like a very skilled player, and he looks like a guy who is going to make the team. And he's been playing with Lias Andersson and Gabe Vilardi so far in the preseason. I think that line looks pretty good. And, you know, with Danault and AI and Kempe being that second line, they're not going to have to be super defensive. And I think, you know, it's a little bit of a risky line to throw out there, but the Kings need to find scoring somehow. And the defense has had its problems the past couple of years, but it's been a strength for the most part in the organization for a long time. And I think it's time now to start taking some risks and start putting out, you know, a forward group that isn't so defensively minded and is willing to go and try things and make plays and score goals. And that's what I think this third line can do. All the guys on the line are young. They have something to prove, and we'll talk about that more individually, but I think it would be a pretty nice line if they can find the chemistry, if they can find production and success at the NHL level. This could be a really crucial key for the Kings to finally get some depth scoring on this team, because it's been top line heavy for a long time now, and they need help. And then that leaves us with the fourth line. Now, the fourth line is going to be a wild card. There's a lot of guys that are still, you know, looking really good and competing for these spots. It's going to be a tough one to figure out who will take the spot. And I think the only obvious answer is going to be Trevor Moore. He's 100% going to be on the team this season. I just think that with the players that are in front of him, he's going to have to slide into that fourth line, which, you know, kind of hurts for Trevor Moore. But if Trevor Moore is our fourth line winger, that's a pretty good sign for the team as a whole. Alongside Trevor Moore, you know, this is where I hope that Jared Anderson-Dolan can really claim that spot. We've seen Blake Lizotte be that guy for a while. And last year, there was times where it looked like Anderson-Dolan was, you know, maybe going to leapfrog, but Blake Lizotte, you know, you got to give him a lot of credit. He's really played his way on the team and been able to keep his role. So, you know, we could see him in the fourth line. I would like to see Anderson-Dolan, and I think the Kings will give him a shot. I just don't know if he has as much security as the rest of the players that I've mentioned. And then the last winger is, who knows? It's going to be whoever makes the best final impression. Athanasiou is definitely a guy, because I don't know where he fits elsewhere, you know, in the top three lines. So do you stick Athanasiou on that fourth line and have it be a speedy, grindy, yet skilled line? Or do you go with a guy like Brendan Lemieux and bring that toughness, bring that grit to the line? I don't know. You know, it's like I said, it's really a toss-up. I haven't even mentioned any of the young prospects that could make the team out of preseason, out of training camp. It's really a wild card. I think that Athanasiou is probably the safest bet, just because the Kings did re-sign him to a one-year contract. I don't think they want to just stick him in the minors, but if someone produces and shows, you know, good results late in preseason and right before the season, then that spot really is up for grabs. And it'll be interesting to see what the fourth line looks like, because really the key for the Kings right now is depth. You know, I don't think that we have the high-end talent that other teams have, but, you know, we're a team that is, you know, we could have, you know, four lines that are our bottom six lines, and that, you know, could become a pretty big factor. I mean, the Kings, knock on wood, the Kings haven't struggled with injuries that much. And so if that was to happen this season, like I said, I don't want it to, but if it was, that is a key strength for the Kings, is that we have a lot of guys that can just fill in the spot. And, you know, the fourth line is the most volatile because of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes up. All right, so on defense, I think it's a lot more cut and dry. Drew Doughty's going to be on the top pairing. I think that they're going to pair him with Mikey Anderson. I think Mikey Anderson looked the best playing with Doughty. The only other person that it could be is Toby Bjornfot, but I don't think Toby Bjornfot is steady enough and reliable enough to be a top line defenseman. I think Mikey Anderson plays 10 years above his age. He's as steady as you can get for a player as young as him and inexperienced. And I think that Drew Doughty built a lot more chemistry with Mikey Anderson than he did with Toby Bjornfot. And I think that they can work well together as that number one pair. As much as I think Bjornfot has a lot of potential, I just think if you're going to throw a guy out there next to Drew Doughty for 25 minutes a night, Mikey Anderson is going to be the guy. Toby Bjornfot, I think, will slide down to the second pairing where he's going to be paired up with Matt Roy. I think it makes sense. Matt Roy, more of that steady stay-at-home guy. That'll allow Toby Bjornfot to hopefully take more risks up the ice. I think his offensive game has a lot of room to grow, and he can feel a little bit safer playing next to a Matt Roy because Matt Roy is going to cover for a lot of mistakes. That's the kind of player that Matt Roy is. And then the third pair, I think we're going to see Alex Edler. He's a veteran. He's definitely losing a step and is at the tail end of his career. So you don't want to be playing him too much, but I think Edler is a really good, again, more of a stay-at-home guy that you can put next to Sean Walker, who I've talked about needs to kind of up his offensive game as well. Walker isn't the best defensively, and I don't think yet that he's used his offensive skills enough to warrant putting him out on the ice. So if he's playing next to a solid, very smart vet like Alexander Edler, who's going to stay back and allow him to take the puck up the ice, take more chances, I think that could really help Sean Walker find his offensive game a little bit more than what we've seen so far. And then for goalies, it's obviously going to be Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson. Cal Peterson most likely going to get the lion's share of the starts, but both guys can do it. I don't think that Jonathan Quick is done. I think he has a lot of game left in him. And with the team getting better in front of him, hopefully we can see Jonathan Quick come back to the form that we know and love. And that would help Cal Peterson as well, because competition between goalies usually creates better play from both of them. So now that we know sort of, kind of, maybe what the team is going to look like on the ice, now I want to talk about the players specifically. So I think there's three groups of players on this team right now. There's the established vets who we know and love. There's the guys that I think just need to up their game a little bit. They need to prove what they can do at the NHL level this season in particular. And then the third group is the young guys, the prospects who are fighting to get a chance in the NHL, maybe fighting to prove where they will end up in the lineup. So looking at that first group, it's the vets. It's pretty simple who they are. It's Kopi, it's Dewey, it's Jonathan Quick. You're going to add Alex Edler, obviously Dustin Brown, and Philip Deneau. These guys are locks in the roster. We know what to expect from them for the most part. I think we could add guys like Iafallo and Matt Roy to this list as well, because even though they're not as old or as experienced as the other ones, you know what you're getting from Iafallo. You know what you're getting from a Matt Roy, and that's good, consistent play. I don't think that those guys are players that the team is looking to get more out of or, find another dimension. I think it's pretty established who they are, how they play. And for the rest of the vets, it's the same thing. You know what you're going to get from a Kopitar. You know what you're going to get from a Drew Doughty. Drew Doughty, I guess, is in a kind of different situation where you do hope that he kind of reaches the level of play he had a couple of years ago. I'm a big believer in the fact that, now that the team is getting more competitive, I think we're going to see a better Drew Doughty. He's a very emotional player, and you can tell when he's not happy, when he thinks his team isn't good, he's not playing as hard as he should. And, it's not something that is okay. He's a professional athlete. He's making the most money on the team. He's a leader in the locker room. You don't want to see that behavior, but Drew Doughty's always kind of been, maybe a little immature. Like I said, very emotional. So I'm hoping that with this new season, with the new team and the new direction that we're going, we're going to see guys like Drew Doughty, guys like Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown, Jonathan Quick kind of reach that level that they were at a few years ago, because, we haven't been making the playoffs. We haven't been playing in tough, grueling games. We haven't added a lot of wear and tear on these guys. It's just kind of been, a COVID shortened season, a long break, another COVID shortened season. So hopefully they can find that new gear again and, continue to be key parts of this lineup. The next group of guys that I want to talk about is, I think, the most important group, and that is the players who are not prospects anymore. They're not solid vets. They still have something to prove. We still haven't seen them at the full potential that we want to see them at, and what this team needs them to play at in order for us to be that playoff team, to be a contender this year. First one is Adrian Kempe. I said that Kempe is probably going to be a second line player along with Dano and Alex Iafallo, but when I was talking about Dustin Brown still being on that first line, Kempe is a guy who should be taking that spot. He's been with this team for a long time. He's, his Achilles heel is consistency. When he's hot, you'll see him go 7-10 game stretches where he's getting a point per game. He's making plays every time he's on the ice. It just doesn't happen as much. I think he had a step in the right direction last year, but last year was just a weird season. Now that we have a new 82 game season, he needs to really step up. And, for him, it's a contract year. Maybe that's going to help. It's an Olympic year, and Kempe's been a guy who has gone to a bunch of world championships for Sweden. So for a player like him, Drew Doughty is in a similar situation. Victor Arvidsson. These are guys that, are playing for an Olympic team spot. And even if they aren't, at that level right now, a really good first half of the season could get them to that level. And so hopefully that's kind of in the back of all their minds when they're playing this year to, especially for Drew Doughty, someone who he's been very vocal about not liking the fact that people have kind of ridden him off the Canadian national team. Take that chip on your shoulder and use it in a good way. And for Kempe, same thing. And, the contract year as well, like hopefully that's a good chip on his shoulder. But just if he can get the consistency down, he should be a first line player. Him playing with Arvidsson and Kopitar, that's a deadly first line if all three of them are clicking. You don't have to worry about Kopi not playing up to his level, but if Arvidsson can find his game again, and if Kempe could really take that step up this year, that's a deadly first line, and that's going to be the first time in a long time that the Kings have had a true first line. Speaking of Victor Arvidsson, like I said, he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder in maybe he's trying to play for, a final spot on the Swedish national team. But I think the biggest chip on his shoulder is the last couple seasons. He was a consistent 30-goal scorer for times with Nashville when Nashville was doing really well. Past two seasons, he's dropped off. And is that a fluke? Is that just because Nashville as a whole dropped off? Or is that because he's not at that level anymore? I think that this is the year for him. If he's going to be playing next to Anze Kopitar, he has no excuses not to reach that 30-goal tally again. And so, it's going to be a big year for him to, like I said, try and get that cloud that's been over him for the past couple of years, get rid of that, and get back to the level that he was playing at and he can continue to play at going forward. The next person we're going to talk about is Gabe Vilardi. I've been, pretty hot and cold on Gabe Vilardi, as Gabe Vilardi has been with the team. He came out guns blazing, was a really, really good end to the season 2 years ago. After a pretty rough season, it was that little glimmer of hope that really started this kind of turn in the organization. And last year, he struggled quite a bit. He found his game at times, but this season, it's a full season for the first time in his career. He's got to be able to play 82 games at the level that he should be playing at, because there's guys like Byfield, there's guys like Tkachyov that are chomping at the bit to get a spot, and Vilardi's in the position now where he is on the team, he has the experience in the NHL, but he's got to make sure that he can take this next season and run with it, or else he will get outclassed by these guys that are waiting to get their chance. I think, like I mentioned, I would like to see Gabe Vilardi play wing. I don't know if they're going to make the change now, if it's going to come in the middle of the season, or if it just won't come at all. I just think it's going to help Gabe Vilardi a lot. He's struggled with the back injuries, and it hasn't really come back yet, but you can tell that he doesn't have the stamina that you need to be an NHL player. And I think playing center and having more of the defensive responsibilities is, a big part of it. So if you can move him to the wing and move Lias Andersson over, I think that makes this team, I think it makes, if you can put him on the wing and move Lias Andersson to center, I just think that would take a little bit of burden off of him, literally in the physical sense. And then, he really needs to take that mental burden off of him. I think we saw it a little bit when Byfield came up for his couple of games last year. You could tell that there was maybe less pressure on Gabe Vilardi because Gabe Vilardi wasn't the number one prospect anymore. There wasn't as much attention or focus on Gabe Vilardi because Quinn Byfield was the new hot thing. And I think this year he needs to not let that stress continue. He needs to just go out there and play as a hockey player. He's made the team. He's established his role on this team. Now it's time to just keep playing, keep improving, and be a productive member on this team, and not a prospect, not someone who's, battling through an injury and had this really good comeback story. He's just a hockey player now, and he's on a team that is a really hard team to keep a spot on with all the young players. He needs to step up, and this is the year where they're going to give him the chance early on. He just has to make sure he can take it and run with it. Next, guys, we're going to talk about Athanasiou. This is, I feel like Athanasiou's had a bunch of make or break years. He keeps getting picked up by teams, extended for a year. But how many times are you going to give this guy a chance to, get back to that 130 goal season? I don't know if he really has a big spot on this team right now. I just think there's so many young guys that could easily take his spot that I don't know if the Kings are going to put as much investment into him as they did last year, especially now that we're trying to be more competitive. But if he can play and he plays well, then that's going to be really good for him. It's just, what opportunity is he going to get? Because he had, pretty much the whole year last year, and he started off really well, and then it just disappeared. So, if that happens again, the Kings this season have a lot more players and a lot more choices to make in terms of what they do with Athanasiou than they were going to do last year. Then on the back end, we have Sean Walker. Sean Walker, I've been a little bit not convinced with Sean Walker. Like I mentioned when I was talking about the lines, I just think that he needs to show something else. I don't think he's a standout defensive player, and we haven't seen the offense be a big factor either. He's a good skater, but he doesn't use it as much. He turns the puck over a lot. So with guys like Brandt Clark being drafted and Brock Faber and all these guys now, he's has a limited time to really get to the level that he needs to be in order to keep his spot, because Doughty's not going anywhere, Walker's not going anywhere. There's only one spot on that right D, and Walker, he needs to take it this year and prove that he deserves to be there. He got a contract extension. He just needs to prove that he's worth it. And then Cal also gets his contract extension. Like I talked about in the last video, I don't know if it was the best idea to do it before the season started. We're going to have to see what Cal Petersen can do. I mean, he's going to be the number one goalie this year. Is he number one goalie material? He can be. We've seen it. When he came into the league, he was lights out. Last year was just, not as convincing. And it was, I think, a little bit of a step in the wrong direction. So this year, it's an 82 game season. He knows that he's the number one. He's not having to fight Jonathan Quick for that ice time. He's got to play like a number one goalie. He's got to play like a $5 million goalie now. And that's pretty tough, but that's what is expected of him, and that's what this team's going to need. Then to finish off this category of players, we have a lot of the reserve guys. So Brendan Lemieux, Austin Wagner, Oli Mata, Blake Lizotte, Brunstrom. These are all guys that are really fighting for, one or two spots on the roster, and they've got to just show something else. I don't think that it's going to be Wagner, but Wagner's a good person to kind of explain it with, because we know what Wagner has. He has speed, and that's his thing. He just doesn't have anything else. So a player like Wagner, for him to really take that next step this year, he's got to add finishing. I mean, that's obviously his big weakness. He gets tons of breakaways. He gets tons of chances. He just can't finish the puck. And this is the year where, time's running out for these guys on the bottom of the depth chart. He's got to prove that he has taken that next step, that he has added something else to his game in order to solidify his spot on this team and in the league. And, it's going to be very tough because there's limited roster space now. But that's what happens when, you've had 2 seasons and you haven't really made that step. Brunstrom's another guy who I think he has more to add into his game, and for the team, we just haven't really seen him do it yet. And time's running out. You can't hold on to these guys forever waiting. And this year, it's like I said, it's going to be really tough for all these guys to get a chance. But if they do get a chance, they have to take it and run with it, because there's not going to be any more chances after this season. All right, and now we're going to be on to the final group, and this is going to be the prospects, the younger guys. I'm not going to talk about the guys who probably aren't going to be on the team right away. That's going to include Quinton Byfield, even though Quinton Byfield right now, at least in preseason, he looks like he's ready. I mean, the criticism last year I had for him was it just physically, I don't think he was at that level, and he lacked a little bit of confidence, which he was an 18-year-old playing in the NHL for his first 6 games. You're going to expect that, but from what I've seen from him so far, he looks ready, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him on the team come opening night. I don't think that's the plan, but plans don't always come to fruition, and if he's ready, he's gonna get a shot. He's our number 1 prospect. We put a lot of draft capital into him, but like I said, I'm not going to be talking about all those AHL guys just because I think they're going to stay in the AHL at least for the start of the season. The first prospect that I want to talk about isn't really a prospect. He's just a new player to the team, and that's Vladimir Tkachyov. Like I've said a bunch of times, I had no idea what to expect from him. The word on him was he's small, but he's very skilled. And now that he's been playing in the preseason and we finally get to see him in the NHL playing with his team, he is very skilled. And I don't think the size is that big of a hindrance. I was very skeptical because of the whole Nikolai Prohorkin thing, but Tkachyov is making me a believer. I think that the Kings want to give him a shot in the NHL, and if he can play well and he can adapt to the North American game and adapt to the team, then for just signing a guy out of Russia, that's going to be a really good deal for the Kings. So he's kind of a low risk, high reward type of player, but it's going to be really nice to see what he can do and see if the Kings can add some skill to this lineup, because that is just still the thing that we really lack the most. Another guy who probably doesn't belong in the prospect tier is Mikey Anderson. I think he has to be in the prospect tier just because of the lack of experience and his age, but you could honestly argue that he deserves to be in the veteran group of this team. I mean, the way that he plays, he's so solid. I think his spot on the team is pretty set in stone, and there's just not much that you have to look at his game and say, oh, he needs to fix this, he needs to work on that. He's a pretty solid player. He's going to get better as he gets more experience, and I think that in the future, he's going to be a huge part of this team, especially in the locker room. He's been a leader everywhere he's gone, and you already see that. He's a very talkative guy. playing with Drew Doughty, he's going to pick up a lot of that kind of stuff. And just, not much to say about Mikey Anderson. Toby Bjornfot is kind of the counterpart, and Toby is now going to be in his third season. He's been pretty protected so far, and so I think this is the year that the training wheels are going to kind of come off for Toby, and he really needs to find his game. Last year I don't think he took as much risk that you would like to see from a young player, because you're going to get mistakes from young defensemen. That's just a fact. And he made mistakes last year, but you can live with those mistakes when they're happening in a learning setting. And I just think that he wasn't trying enough last year. He wasn't putting himself in spots where he was forcing himself to figure things out, to try new ways to move the puck or be in the offense a little bit more. So I think this is a really important year for Toby to just have more confidence in his game and not be worried about getting benched or getting sent down. He's going to get time in the NHL, and he needs to hopefully advance a little bit more for how long he's had in the system. And then the last two guys are guys I've already kind of talked about, Jared Anderson-Dolan and Lias Anderson. Jared Anderson-Dolan, like I've said a couple times, he needs to leapfrog guys like Blake Lizotte. He needs to really establish himself as that fourth line center, and I think the Kings are willing to give him that chance, but he needs to be more consistent. Last year he had some really good moments, and then he had moments where it wasn't like he was playing bad, but he just kind of wasn't doing much. He became really quiet, and so this year he needs to really just establish himself as a member of this team and take himself out of that prospect group and into just not the vets, but just that middle group of players. And I think the Kings organization really wants to see him be that type of player. He has the skills and the tools to be a really good fourth line center, third line center, penalty killing guy. It's just he needs to nail his name on that lineup, and unfortunately for a guy like Blake Lizotte, he needs to take Blake Lizotte's job, and he's at this stage in his career now where it's time for him to do that. And then Lias Anderson, I kind of talked about him with Gabe Vilardi. I think that I would love to see Lias Anderson play center. I think he's got a lot of skill, more skill than most players on the team. Not so much offensive skill, but just the way he plays the game. He's a very all-around guy, and I think he's just a very steady rock that we can put on that third line as a center. Again, take some of the load off of Gabe Vilardi, and give more. Give more to Lias Anderson. He wants more responsibility as a hockey player. I think that's one of the reasons why he left New York and went back to. All right, so like I said, with a lot of the guys who are going to be in the minors and these younger prospects that haven't really had a chance in the NHL yet, we're going to cover them in the next video, and that video is going to be a little bit more of a fun video and not as serious as this one is. But as I mentioned with Quinn Byfield, there's very high chance that we're going to see multiple players in this kind of prospect group in the minors make that step into the NHL, whether it be because of injuries or just getting a chance to see what they're made of at the NHL level. It's going to be a really, really fun time. I mean, it's kind of an awkward time for the Kings because we are at the spot where we should be a playoff contender, but we also just have so much young talent that we still haven't even seen hit the ice yet in a Kings jersey. And that, I guess it makes this next season a little safer in the fact that, look, if we suck another time, then at least we got Quinn Byfield, we've got Alex Turcotte, we've got Fagemo, we've got Tkachyov. But I think it's going to be another year for them. I just think that this team is going to do well. I don't know if we're going to be a playoff team, but I think we'll be competitive this season, and it's going to be tough for these guys to be able to crack the lineup and for us to really see what we have. And we've had that number one prospect pool for a while. It's going to be a slow trickling process to get those guys to the NHL. And even if you're a highly touted prospect, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a superstar in the NHL, obviously. But it's still a fun time to be a Kings fan. And it's going to be a fun time this next season. That's why I hope you guys stick around. If you are not a subscriber, please subscribe. This year, it's going to be better. I give you that promise, at least from this end. So like I said, subscribe to the channel. If you watched the video, you liked it, please like it and leave a comment on what you think. Definitely for the forward lines, because I just think that bottom six, it's anyone's guess who's going to, one, make the team and how the lines are going to shake up. So thanks you guys for watching. Stick around on the channel for part 3, where we're going to talk about our prospects and end the season preview and get ready for the start of the 2021-22 season. I'm excited. I hope you guys are too.